Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are asking a huge question, one that really gets to the heart of all creativity. Where does that genius, that unique artistic style actually come from? Is it some sudden lightning bolt of inspiration, or is it something else entirely? All right, let's get right into it. So, first up, let's talk about the story we all kind of know. The one we see in movies and read about all the time. It's the story of the brilliant but broken genius. If you were to ask someone on the street, hey, where does great art come from? Their answer, even if they don't realize it, usually comes down to one single really dramatic idea. And that idea? It's rupture, a break, a moment of intense pain, some kind of massive trauma or upheaval in an artist's life that's supposed to be the key that unlocks their genius. This idea suggests that the greatest art is basically forged in fire. And of course, there's one artist who has become the ultimate poster child for this whole belief. Vincent van Gogh. I mean, you look at his intense cypresses, those blazing sunflowers, his swirling night skies, and it's almost impossible not to see them as a direct line to his inner turmoil, right? Every single brushstroke feels loaded with passion and pain, making him the absolute perfect example of the tortured artist. And look, it's a powerful story, a really compelling one. But what if it's not the only story? What if some of the most profound art in the world comes from a place that's, well, the complete opposite of all that pain and rupture? And that brings us to this really powerful alternative idea, a concept that's all about continuity and immersion, not breaks and trauma. To really get this, I want you to meet an artist named Mahmood Farshchian. He's a brilliant Persian painter, and his work, well, it's a fantastic counterargument to that whole tortured artist myth. See, for Farshchian, his genius wasn't sparked by some big, sudden event. Nope. It was built up, slowly, layer by tiny layer, from a whole lifetime of just soaking in the incredible visual world of his home in Isfahan. Think about it. The swirling patterns on Persian carpets, the incredible detail in miniature paintings, the spiritual meaning of birds, all of that stuff became this massive personal library of creative ideas for him. And this is what leads us to the core idea of this whole explainer, the streambed of memory. The best way to think about it is like a river, okay? All those things an artist sees and hears early in life, the sights, the sounds, the patterns, they get packed away as memory units. And over a lifetime, this reservoir of memories doesn't shatter. It just flows like a river, constantly feeding everything they create. Okay, so how does this streambed actually work? Well, it turns out we can break it down into two basic ways the brain structures and pulls from these creative memories. First up, you've got the emotional function. This is all driven by the amygdala. That's the brain's emotional hub. This is when a memory, like a specific image, say a sunflower or a bird, gets absolutely supercharged with feeling. And the artist just keeps coming back to that symbol again and again and again, because it's just so emotionally powerful for them. And then you've got the second type, the algorithmic function. Now, this is way more analytical. It's structured by different parts of the brain, the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. With this one, the things an artist takes in aren't stored as raw emotion, they're stored as patterns, as rules, as systems. The artist basically develops their own kind of visual grammar that they can then use to build their work. And this slide just lays it all out perfectly, doesn't it? On one side, you have that emotional function. It's driven by pure feeling, and it gives us these emotionally saturated symbols, like Van Gogh's sunflowers. And on the other side, you've got the algorithmic. It's driven by patterns and rules, and it gives you these highly structured sequences. Think of the almost mathematical perfection of Bach's counterpoint. Okay, so here's the really crucial part. This isn't about being one or the other. It's not a binary choice. Really, artists exist somewhere along a spectrum between these two functions. So let's take a look at what that actually looks like. To really see this spectrum in action, let's grab another example. But this time, it's not a single artist, it's a whole group. Canada's iconic group of 7. So just like Farshchian, their art came from deep immersion, not some sudden break. They took trip after trip into the Canadian wilderness, right? And through all that deep, quiet observation, they started to consolidate the landscape into a set of visual rules, what you could almost call a wilderness algorithm. They developed a kind of visual shorthand, a code for how to paint pine trees or northern lakes, or the specific way shield rock looks. And once they had that code, they could repeat and recombine it in their work. It's just a fantastic example of a style that's way over on the algorithmic side of things. And boom, here's where it all comes together on one big spectrum. You can see it, right? At one extreme end, you've got the purely algorithmic genius of Bach, and at the complete other end, the purely emotional power of Van Gogh. The group of seven, they lean algorithmic. An artist like Georgia O'Keeffe, with her desert flowers and bones, she's definitely leaning emotional. And then you get these incredible figures like Kandinsky and Farshchian, right there in the middle, beautifully blending both of these functions to create their own unique styles.
Just two. That's it. At the end of the day, it all comes down to those two functions, the emotional and the algorithmic. And this simple framework, it's a seriously powerful new tool. It lets us look right past that old romantic myth of the tortured artist and finally start to see the deeper, underlying structures of creativity itself.
So, what's the big takeaway? Why does any of this matter? How does this change the way you might look at a painting in a museum or even listen to a piece of music?
Well, it reminds us that art isn't always born from a violent, sudden rupture. It can also be a river, flowing steadily from a deep and continuous streambed of memory that's been built up over an entire lifetime. It's a story of continuity, not just chaos.
And so, that leaves you with one last question to think about. As you consider this whole spectrum, from the purely emotional to the purely algorithmic, which artist, which creator are you going to see in a completely new light now?